9 out of 10 startups fail. Women and minority-led companies receive less than 10% of all venture capital. This is an environment designed for failure. Startup Hype Man's mission is to use the power of story to make success inevitable, not the exception. And this podcast is designed for entrepreneurs to share lessons learned from their stories so that you can figure out what whatever it takes means for your company to make it. Let's kick it.
Introduce you in a way. It just came to me like 5 minutes ago.
From the Hype HQ recording studio in Chicago, Illinois, it's Startup Hype Man, the podcast. I am your host and the Startup Hype Man, Raj Nation. Every week we bring you real talk and unpack the behind-the-curtain strategies with the entrepreneurs who are doing it or who have been there, done that, all to help your startup grow up and stand out. Join the Hype Nation and catch every new episode, plus get resources and other stuff that actually help you, not the whack promotional junk that other companies try to shove down your throat. All you have to do is add your email at startuphypeman.com. Ready for some real talk? Time now for me, Raj Nation, to turn it over to, well, me, Raj Nation, for this week's conversation.
And making her way to the microphone, residing in North Saanich, British Columbia, Canada, from Karachi, Pakistan, Humaira Ahmed.
That's awesome.
Humaira Ahmed, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for everyone listening, Humaira is the founder and CEO of a digital app, a digital platform called Locale, which is a networking platform for women in business, offering safer and easier ways to meet like-minded women locally. Humaira's mission is to get women offline for real connections for a better life. Locale is in pre-revenue mode, currently with 600 beta users, planning to monetize later this year. Humaira, I hope I did your introduction justice.
You did, except my name. It's Humaira.
Oh, crap. Damn.
That's okay.
Oh, man, I got so excited doing that.
Another version.
I got so excited doing that introduction.
Yeah.
Okay, let me redo it. So this will all stay on the recording. Let me redo it.
Awesome.
And making her way to the microphone, residing in North Saanich, British Columbia, Canada, from Karachi, Pakistan, Humaira Ahmed.
That's awesome.
Okay, now we can start the show. So,
okay, let's do it.
Humaira, our conversation today, our topic is how do you conduct worthwhile user research? Just off the bat, can you give an abstract here? Why is this on your mind? Why is this important to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important because as startup founders, we can get really carried away with our, passion. And at the end of the day, wanted to create a real business, and a real business only happens when you have real people and you're fulfilling a real need in the marketplace. And user research is key to that. So yeah, I mean, you're putting so much on the line, many sacrifices being made, a lot of money, time, energy, effort goes into it. So it's important to make sure that whatever it is that you're starting a business will be used by people.
And we are going to dive so much further into this. It'll be a great conversation. Before we get into all that, let's learn a little bit more about you. So I mentioned in your ring announcer-esque introduction there that you came from Karachi, Pakistan. You actually attended Karachi University and have a bachelor's degree in software engineering. Can you kind of just talk to us? I think everyone has certain perceptions about Pakistan. Maybe they're accurate, maybe they're inaccurate. But can you talk to me about what's it like growing up there, and is getting a bachelor's in software engineering a big deal?
Yeah, good question. Wow. So I grew up in Karachi, Pakistan, and just growing up, I just remember one thing throughout my childhood years was I always wanted to be a boy, because as a girl, you're always told, who to be, what you could do, what you couldn't do, with the more emphasis on what you couldn't do. And so I just always, looked at my brothers like they just had it all. And I wanted it all too. I used to play cricket, and I knew that was going to be taken away from me when I turned 13 because girls don't play cricket. And so a lot of it was just like, holding girls back. And so there's that. But on the flip side, it was also that if you don't want to be a housewife, as a profession, I guess, and if you really want to do something in life, then you can only do so many things. You could be a software engineer, well, not software engineer, but an engineer, lawyer, doctor, scientist, and those would be the only professions suited or respectable professions for girls and women. And so I didn't really have much of a choice. I couldn't get into the media or anything else apart from those professions. And so I was good at math, and I, computer science especially was, just such a hot topic at the time and subject. So I was doing really well in that. Like even in our grade 10 computer science courses, like I had like 97 percentile, and it was amazing. So I just knew that this is something that kind of comes to me and I can do this. So that's why I got into software engineering. But a little bit about that, actually, I'll just say that I was engaged when I was 15 and 17 to men I didn't know. And at the time, this is now, I'm 34 now, so this is a long time ago, 19 years ago. So they just want you to be married as a girl, as a woman. And the younger you get married,
goal,
the better. Right? That's the goal. The better suitors you're going to get. And so when I was 15, I just finished my grade 10. So I was engaged, and I just remember it was just a shock to me because at 15, you're still a child. I remember thinking every night I would cry and beg to my parents to not do this because I wanted to do so much with my life. I just never, again, wanted to be a boy because I never conformed to what girls, should be like. So just crying every night, just thinking, oh gosh, God, just give me one chance to escape this. If I do, I will do amazing things with my life. And I mean, fortunately for me, I was able to escape those, and that's another story. We're not going to get into that. But it happened with me twice, 15 and 17. And so I made a deal with my dad. My dad said, if you can get into the best school, which was Karachi University, for, an engineering program, we will leave you aside. We won't worry about your marriage until you graduate. And so that was my primary motivation to get into that school. So I got into it, and that was that. And I did 2 years of that actually in Karachi.
That's quite fascinating. Doesn't even begin to describe that story. You've obviously overcome a lot. Now, my next question here kind of digs into that a little bit more. So, coming from that, I guess let's call it a very traditional background, right? And the listeners can't see this, but I can see you through the video, right? Like you don't wear a hijab, you have blonde hair. Has that been, I guess, if you think about your upbringing, your dynamic, was that a difficult transition to make, or have you always been like this?
Good question. Wow. I haven't really thought of it that way. So I didn't really wear hijab in Karachi growing up. And a lot of, actually, that's one of the stereotypes about, Karachi especially, and I can only speak for Karachi. It's very modernized. I mean, there are parts of Karachi where you can go. So it's a very class system, caste system, and also just, levels of, westernized, I guess, societies within Karachi. And so I never wore hijab. I come from, a middle class family, but more like upper middle class family in Karachi. And so, we always grew up with maids, and it was a good lifestyle. And we never really wore hijab. So that was never a big deal for me. But the blonde hair, it's actually interesting. I grew up watching a lot of Bollywood, Hollywood movies. So, and I did have my own kind of idea of who I wanted to be. And blonde hair is just more I tried it. I thought it looked good. My husband loves it. And it's now kind of become a bit of a brand with Locale. People recognize me from my hair. Yeah,
the Locale.
It's the Locale hair. And so now I actually have a hard time going back because I look very different with dark hair.
Sure.
But overall, I have always been very, I can adapt very quickly. I remember actually on that note when we moved to Canada, I was 20. I remember I noticed that there was a little bit of what do you call it? Not racism, but definitely, I don't even know if it's discrimination, but it's, just if you speak in a certain accent, it's like, oh, you're a fob, or like, you're from Pakistan. And at the time, I mean,
it's singling out in some fashion.
Totally. Absolutely. And it's also just that, especially coming from Pakistan, because of the preconceived notions and stereotypes about Pakistan, you don't want to be known as Pakistani. And that's just a sad reality. Although now I'm very proud because I'm breaking stereotypes. But at the time, it was like, I don't want to be called out as like this Pakistani girl. And so I started to actually speak. I knew English. We grew up, we always went to English medium school. So I knew English as a language, like really well, actually. But I started to pick up on the accent. And so now when I meet with people, they go, oh my gosh, like you speak English. I'm like, where did you learn it? It's like, well, I knew English. I just, learned. But I get it every single time. And it's because I don't look like traditional Pakistani, like my looks are not like a traditional, the stereotypical Pakistani woman. So yeah, but a lot of it was also, because I've been through so much in my life, I did not want to be singled out, like you said, or be discriminated against, for any reasons whatsoever. So hair came later. It was just recent. But in terms of my accent, I started to learn really fast. And actually, my brothers were making fun of me. I remember, saying water. And in Pakistan, it's what, I don't even know how to say it now. Is water. It water? And so I remember saying water.
Soft R, right? Water.
Yeah, totally. And my brothers were like, ha, ha, ha. Like, they just made fun of me because they're like, wannabe. But I knew in the back of my mind, I wanted to be respected or known or recognized for who I am as a person and not be judged based on what I look like, what I'm wearing and how I speak. And so that was important to me, but everybody's different.
Yeah, and I mean, I can tell from listening to you, you said a boot a couple different times. Nothing's more Canadian than saying a boot.
A boot? Is that like a boat?
Yeah, exactly.
That's hilarious. Yeah, it's, I don't even know.
So let's fast forward a little bit. You come to Canada to finish to get a second bachelor's rather, in 2006. And you go to York University. Mm-hmm. And then 2011, you found Spice Marketing, which is on-demand creative services for startups and small, medium-sized businesses. How does the software engineer degree turn into owner of a marketing firm?
Yeah, so we moved to Canada. My family moved, so we just migrated, and I didn't have a choice in that. So when I moved, it was interesting because I enrolled in double majors, communication studies and computer science at York University. And only because I knew that in Canada, I was told that I could pursue other professions as well. And I wasn't sure if computer science was always going to be for me. And so luckily for me, my first job in Canada was at a database company. It was an IT company. And it was more like data entry type of thing, but I got to see a lot of engineers and how they were. And it was very stereotypical. They wouldn't talk to many people. They were just like in their own like offices or cubicles. And I was like, this is not the life I want to live in Canada. Like, I just cannot be like this. And so that was my reason for enrolling in double majors and getting into communication studies as well. And I just fell in love with that program because now I was like, I can actually express myself. And like, hopefully you can tell, like, I'm very, expressive. And I just thought, just also to learn and adapt to the culture in Canada, I would need to, communication is a good way to be able to learn all that. And so that was my reasoning for taking communication studies. But also, actually, I only did computer science in Toronto at York for 8 months. So in total, I've done roughly around 3 years of software engineering. But what happened was, so this is an interesting story. In Karachi, we were about 40% women. In our program. And
shocking.
Well, it's the norm there, because if you
I guess you said you have to pick out of one of those if you are.
Exactly. And women they're really good at, they pursue those degrees in, STEM field. Actually in US and Canada as well, 60% of the women hold degrees in STEM, which is amazing. But what was interesting was because I already had over 2 years of my credits from Karachi. They were all transferred, and I was basically in third year. So by that time, a lot of the women have already dropped out. So when I joined the program at York, the classes that I had taken, I was the only woman in a class of like 160. It was intimidating. It was a shock because here I'm thinking this is a progressive country. You know, it should be better than Karachi or Pakistan in general. And it wasn't in terms of the academics. So that was like, wow, like what's going on? And so, but you can only do so much, right? It's like a different culture. You're in a different place and different people. And it was intimidating. So I could only continue it for 8 months. And then I was like, you know what? I'm actually enjoying communication studies so much. I just want to do this. And so I actually finished my degree in communication studies, specialized honors. I still graduated with their computer science kind of department, but that's what I kind of focused on. So having that background, and I knew I didn't want to be a computer scientist. I just knew I wanted to do something related to communications, marketing, media. And I got an internship at York doing marketing, and I just loved it. I was like, wow, like this is amazing. I enjoyed this more. And the reason for Spice Marketing is also because I already in Toronto, I had worked for a few years in marketing and sales, and I just loved that aspect of work. So I knew I wanted to do something around that. But what I also learned was what I had was so unique, like a combination of, just understanding how, the software lifecycle, the product roadmap. I knew that I would be a better fit doing marketing and communications for tech companies. It just kind of seemed like a no-brainer. And I just learned that over time. So when I moved to Victoria, it was through my husband. He's from here. We got married, we moved. I moved here. And there were no jobs in marketing in Victoria area. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm an entrepreneur.
Create your own. Yeah.
Do your own thing. And so that's what I did. And luckily for me, I just had to do one pro bono project, and that led to a lot of the good work. So that's kind of what I did. And on demand in that's kind of how it was just good because then I could also choose my own projects. Like if I didn't want to work with somebody or at a certain company with a certain company, I just could say, too busy,
Sure.
And yeah, so it just kind of made sense to me to do
Awesome. So around the end of 2017 is when Locale comes about. Again, it's the networking platform for women to offer safer and easier ways to meet other like-minded women in their area. So I'm going to imagine that the genesis of this came from some personal experience you had. Could you just give like the 30-second background of how this came about?
Sure. So it was basically around social isolation for me. I've moved around a lot. I come from a different, background, and in Victoria, I've lived for 7 years. So I thought, I had kind of my tribe. But after I had my second daughter, so I have 2 kids, and my second daughter, she was born, I just started to feel really isolated. I'm not a typical, stay-at-home mom, but I'm ambitious, wanted to get back into the workforce, and that was a lot for me to deal with. And the fact that I didn't have a lot of similar, like-minded women around me who could push me forward, or just even I could share my challenges with, that was really isolating. And isolation is a big problem we face. We spend so much time online, and I wanted to really connect with women in person who lived close to me and shared similar interests, professional and personal, to just get offline, right? And I wanted that for me. And then I realized it wasn't just my problem. So that's why I founded Locale.
So let's transition now to and talk about our topic question for today, which is about conducting worthwhile user research. Tell me why it would have been a bad idea to say, well, I'm experiencing this. I know the isolation. I just need to build it for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be really bad because you can solve your own problems by being super proactive and can find other solutions. The biggest thing that everybody should look at before starting any project or venture is the market big enough? Because the roller coaster that the startup life is, it's not easy. It's not for everyone. You don't only need to be passionate about the mission and the vision and solve your own needs, but know that this is actually a business. And a business will only be formed when there's a real problem, there's a real market, and you can find that problem market fit as well as product market fit. Because like I said, so much goes into it. A lot of sacrifices are made. And it'll always be, there's tons of ups and downs. And so, I can't just, spend hours and hours just trying to solve my problem. And this time I could have gone and, made actually some connections and be done with it.
Yeah. I like what you said here. You said there's problem market fit and product market fit. And I think at least everyone listening is familiar with product market fit, but talk to me more about the concept of problem market fit.
Yeah, so problem market fit, from again my experiences in being in a startup, is there a real problem? What problem am I solving? And that's kind of like the basis of our company. We're not selling a payment processing solution. We're solving an emotional pain point. We're, it's like a social impact company. We're looking to tackle social isolation and loneliness. And this is a big problem. So that's where it's like, it's a worldly problem that the world faces. There's every day you'll find some kind of articles around this topic of how we're becoming a lonelier society. We're becoming isolated. That leads to other health problems, depression, and death. And that's actually worse than having diabetes or heart diseases. So, and the fact that I felt this, it's a problem, right? Like, it's a problem in our society, and how do we address it? So that's where it's like, it's a problem. It's a need that people have. And something needs to be done about that. So that's a problem market. It's a problem with a lot bigger market. So that's where the problem market thing is. Now, the product market is more like, can you build something that people will use that will solve that problem?
Right. Okay, I like how you broke that down. So talk through for Locale how you went about finding that problem that existed beyond you. And obviously there's like articles, right? But I don't think it's enough to just say I have a problem and articles corroborate it. There had to be some type of field research.
Oh yeah, you'll find anything on Google. Right. I mean, you can find anything to validate whatever.
Especially if you go to those alternative news sites, you can find any story that fits the narrative you want.
Absolutely. So so it's interesting because I think having that marketing background really helps. So what I did was, I remember I just couldn't shake it off. Like, I've had many ideas over the years, but this was the one idea that I was like, okay, I have this problem. It's so bad that I just want to solve it. But I also wanted to see, I can solve it for myself. I know it'll be hard, but I'll do it. But I wanted to see if others had it. So I talked to some of my friends first and foremost, like, hey, there's an increasing disconnect in our relationship, for various reasons, right? Like different life stages. Do you feel the same way? And they would say, well, yeah, it's awkward, but yeah, it's true. And then I started to talk to other women, around me, my friends' networks and my other professional networks as well. Like, hey, how do you feel about this? Like, do you find that it's really hard as we transition from one stage of life to another? You have a hard time connecting with like-minded women. And the answer was, yeah, whether you have a baby, whether it's illness, whether it's travel or moving to a new place or moving into a new sector, there's so much happens that we lose our connections. And then of course there's research. But the one thing that I did about the marketing that I mentioned was I set up a landing page because I already was working so much. I have 2 little kids. I didn't have enough time to just waste, right? So what I did was I set up a landing page for Locale, and I wanted to see if it would get any traction. Because if it got traction, then I would know, I need to now pursue it more seriously. And so I set up a landing page around end of November, and within 2 months, I had over 100 signups to a newsletter that didn't even exist. And so that was kind of like a user research in its own way, customer discovery, right? This is okay. People want this.
Well, within that, I could create locale.com, but no one's going to know it exists, right? So how did people find the landing page? I just
put it out there on my social media. And interestingly enough, I, at the time, actually, LinkedIn is interesting now for me because this is November 2017, and I had about 580 connections on LinkedIn. Now, actually, I have over 2,500, which is amazing.
Yes.
But so just putting it out through my Twitter, mostly I would say Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. So I started to see some traction, like, okay, what's this? And at the time, to be honest, I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. I just knew that I was feeling lonely and I wanted an easier way to connect with like-minded. Actually, it was people. So that's what, it started as like people. So I had, like interest from men and women, but it was mostly women. So this is interesting about the user research, because even just through that, I realized that it was mostly women that were interested in what I might have to offer. So that was kind of like my first kind of take on user research, customer discovery, learning who's actually, interested in this. And there were some men too, for sure. But I would say it was like maybe.
Yeah, but
like
if it's 97 out of
totally,
if 97 women out of
exactly.
100, right? That's an
totally.
indicator. So your initial idea was general connection as opposed to women focused connection.
Absolutely. And then what I realized was, a few things. So I enrolled into a venture accelerator program out of Vancouver, actually. It was a distance program. They took me in. They just loved my energy and passion. And I knew that, doing just the research, there's so many platforms out there, that offer, friendship and, networking and all that kind of stuff. And so what was it that I was offering? What was it that, the problem or the pain point that all these other platforms couldn't solve? And so based on my experience, I started to do like more extensive customer discovery, not just what I could find online, but in terms of like from my own perspective. Okay, so there's Meetup, there's Bumble, there is, for instance, even Hey Vina, which I discovered after. There's LinkedIn, there's Facebook. Like, what is it that I want to build that's going to solve not just my problem, but will address this big market need? And that's where, I think that program was really, really helpful. It was extremely valuable because they really ask you tough questions. Like, how are you going to make money? Like, how are you different from, say, like a Bumble? Or how are you different from, say, like a Hey Vina? And it was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, like now you need to really dig deep. And that's, I think, a really good time for founders to really look at, can you, navigate this market with a unique solution, having a unique value prop, because again, so many sacrifices are being made. Like, are you just doing it for fun? Are you doing it as a hobby? Or are you really building a business? If you are building a business, that's different than, and when you're building a business, you really need to look at your competitive advantage. You need.
So what did you find then?
So then what I found,
other ones, what is Locale's place in the market?
So the one thing that really stood out, which is also why I like just doing something for women, but also addressing a big problem of social isolation amongst professional women. What I found was Locale is the only platform as of right now that offers women in business who work in especially male-dominated industries to easily connect with women who are in similar life stages, but also, work at, say, you could be working at a Microsoft as a project manager, and you might want to connect with somebody, a project manager at SAP. So nobody's doing that. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to connect these women who either are entrepreneurs in business or who are working professionals in, good jobs, and they want to connect with these women because that was a market that it's still kind of a little untapped. And by doing that, we're solving this problem of social isolation as well as creating a good culture for even companies, because companies right now, they spend billions of dollars. Like in US, tech companies alone spend $16 billion in diversity inclusion initiatives. And that money goes towards retaining, not just attracting, but retaining top female talent, as well as people of color. I know, being this poster child, that there's a big problem. Like 56% of the women quit their jobs mid-careers working in STEM fields, primarily tech, because they feel isolated, lonely, and frustrated. So doing all this customer research gave me this kind of unique value prop. And so over time, Locale could have been for anyone. Then Locale became just for women, and it could be for any women. Then it became for women who are professionals. And then I saw entrepreneurs were like, wow, like we have a lot of female founders on the platform. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, okay, so what's going on here? So then further digging into who you have, what messaging is resonating. So you're constantly doing user research, whether it's with your messaging, whether, it's figuring out, you may think it's for moms, but at the end of the day, like, are moms really using it? There are other platforms for moms. There's Peanut, there's Mom, Social Mom. Like there's so much out there. For me, it was also like, who's going to pay me? Am I doing ad support model? If I were to do ad support model, like, sure. Locale then the primary goal is to have as many users as possible, right? Yep. So then, but I didn't want to do ad support model. So how am I going to make money? So again, these professional women, right now, it's also very topical, the security, the privacy, like all of this is so topical that, again, the trends in the market, like that's another user research, right? Like you need to see how you're going to make money. And users are like, we'd rather pay for this, right? Like we'd rather pay for this than to sell our data. Because if you are not paying for a product, then you are the product. And we know that. So, and so that was the thing, right? So that's also started to stand out. Like these professional women, they can't afford what, the pricing will start at $3 per user per month and can go up to $10. But starting at $3, like $3 like a cup of coffee, but that's enough for Locale to make enough money. Like we have 1 million users, everybody's paying minimum $3, we're fine. So I started to look at different revenue models, and that just, again, women were like, we'd rather pay for this and we'll learn, right? Like we'll learn in summer, like, are they actually paying? What are they paying for?
Are they saying they're paying, or will they actually pay?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I started to see, but the good part was, again, another part of user research was who can pay? Who would be more willing to pay? It wouldn't be the moms who stay at home. Like they don't care. Like, sure, they can see ads, So I also did discovery from them. Some were like, you know what? We don't care. We want to see ads. Like we want to see what we can buy. And whereas the women who work at these big tech companies, they were like, I don't want my data to be compromised. I'm happy to pay, so because there's Facebook for that. So that's when I was like, okay, so there's a few things happening here. There's also this, who's going to pay or who is likely to pay. Of course, then we need to build the sticky, experience for that. But that also helped us narrow down the market. And and then we have a unique value prop through that. And then over time, I mean, we've grown organically so far primarily. I do, some social media posts here and there, but it's just me. Yeah. And I can only go so far. Right? Yeah, exactly. So no paid, nothing. And we've been able to grow organically just through these women. So, and right now it's a good MVP. We're making it better every week, but it's a good MVP. But the fact that these women, they're mostly like 95% of the women work in tech companies. This was like, wow, like we've got something here. So as we move forward, we're constantly finding out about users, where they're coming from. What their behavior is, what their persona is. So, and the persona is huge because as a startup, you cannot be for everyone. You cannot cater to everyone. Also because we want to make good matches, I was like, okay, we need to just focus on women working in STEM fields, primarily tech, because not only are they using it, for us to have good matches for them, we need to have more women who work in these tech companies. Mm-hmm. So you have more in common than just coffee, walk, all this kind of stuff. It could be data science. It could be marketing. It could be SaaS, So that's what we're kind of, constantly we're, making it better and just getting more focused every build. Yeah.
So this is a really good process you've laid out. Let me just recap it for our listeners. I was taking a lot of notes and essentially here's what I mapped out when you think about conducting worthwhile user research. So obviously it starts with the idea, hey, I can do something. I recognize an issue going on in my life or something happening to people. Let me fix that in some way. So you have the idea. After that, step one is identifying first problem market fit, which includes assessing, is the market big enough? As well as really learning what is the true problem you are solving. which means you must talk to the people as part of this process. Ideally, you want to be in a situation where the people you need to talk to, you already have access to in some way. You mentioned you went to your friends first who were in a specific field, right? The key thing, I mean, you didn't really say it explicitly, but I gleaned it from the way you talked about the questions you were asking, is you're asking questions to learn, not to validate a hypothesis you've already come up with, right? You have to be in scientist mode for this, because a scientist, when they do an experiment, they write a hypothesis, and their goal is not to prove that right. It is to either accept or reject the hypothesis, because science wins out in the end, not emotion.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So asking questions truly from a place where you're trying to understand their situation, not try to project a solution you've already come up with onto them, because that is how you learn that this was more skewed towards a women-focused problem than an everyone problem. And your initial idea that you had tweaked and you pivoted.
Yeah.
I think and part of this too, you set up the landing page where you got a lot of interest, which helped lead to that conclusion that this is more of a women-focused problem. So that type of research there is what led to that pivot. I would lump that figuring out the problem market fit as step one. From there, the next step is product market fit, which involves a few different pieces to it. But the first part of product market fit is finding your unique place within the realm, within the product marketplace, I should say, within the other things that are out there. So you actually went in and you used these other platforms, Bumble, LinkedIn. You are already using them naturally, right? But then you actually started to look into them a little bit more. And what your goal is to find what is missing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are they not addressing either at all or not well enough that people still have a need for something else? And that's really where you found the true idea of social isolation. That's where you found your ideal user, I think, which is addressing social isolation for professional women in male-dominated industries, primarily the tech field. So for everyone listening right now, before I go into the rest, just think about how much easier your life is. Obviously, it's still hard, but think about how much more informed you are when you can say that our ideal user are professional women in male-dominated industries, primarily tech, who are experiencing social isolation. Think about that compared to our target market is professional women. It's completely different messaging you can develop from there, completely different product you develop, and pathway that you take. So the next thing after that is, okay, well, what are the trends going on? Which is where you found, hey, there's a company problem too with company culture and losing women once they hit a certain point in their career. I also think something that happened for you here, which I don't even know you didn't outright say this. I don't know if you necessarily realize it either, but another trend is that you don't have to create, like this is not 9 years ago when Tinder has not even come out yet. And the idea of connecting online is still very new, right? In your case, people already understand that type of behavior, and they've already made that behavior change. What they need is the behavior they're already doing, but for the problem that suits them.
Yeah.
Right? So that makes it a little bit easier that the trend is already headed in that direction, that you're not having to convince them that something even exists, that they should do something totally new they've never done before. I also liked what you said about if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. I've never thought about that before. I am Facebook's product.
No, we all are.
And ultimately, what you will find in this process is that if you do this well enough, the market will lead you toward what they want and what you should build.
Yeah, I just want to say on that too, like a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, there were times initially in my venture where I felt, but this is what I want to do, but this was my idea. And then the reality is you need to fail fast. You need to learn, okay, you know what? sure, this is what I thought. And sometimes as founders, we're so passionate, we don't even want to listen. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the biggest reasons startups fail, because you're building something for yourself and you're not building it for the entire, the market. And it was interesting because I was like, well, my mom friends could use it, Right. And it was interesting because that's also like, you have to ask those tough questions from your users. I actually did various research methods, and this is where my communications background helped. You do surveys. So we did online survey, and these were very open-ended questions. I wasn't looking to, because users will tell you what you want to hear. That's why a lot of polls are, skewed. So they will tell you what you want to hear. And I had to be honest to myself with my time and be like, okay, open-ended question. And I realized like some of the friends who I thought would be perfect candidate for Locale, they were not interested in Locale. And so just even learning that was interesting for me. And it's good to do that early on. And so open-ended questions are great. So doing survey, I actually just leave the building, just go talk to real people. So just, cold, emails, just talking to people on the streets. Yeah, I had to do it. If I can't do this, then I'm not getting all the right data. Of course, online research, also getting on each of these platforms, reading the reviews, that other users leave. Like, what's the problem? Let's say, for instance, like a Hey Vina. What is it that, because they have millions of users, like what is it that Hey Vina is not solving?
Right.
And so just learning more about that and what the users are complaining about consistently. Mm-hmm. Not one person, not two people, majority of them.
Yeah.
And what happened with Vero, actually, is it Vero, the social platform? Within like it was last year, like it was a hot topic. Like I think this 1 week where Vero was like viral because it comes from a billionaire. So a billionaire founded the company. So it was to basically be Instagram's competition. And within like a week or like short amount of time frame, they grew like over 3 million users, because it was just like, okay, the first million users are going to be like, it's going to be free forever for the first million users. The rest of them will have to pay. It will be a paid platform. And what they did, it was interesting because we were still building our platform. And I was like, wow, like another one to the matrix, the competitive matrix. But it was interesting because Vero did something really not good. And it was, they put out this messaging. They actually got over like millions of users. Their system crashed. So they were not prepared to sustain that user base. And so for me, it was important. We're not doing like paid ads. We're not doing all that stuff because sure, even if we do get these users, can our beta sustain this user base?
Yeah.
So it was a good user research, right? Like learning curve. So Vero's, I don't even know where Vero's at. Nobody's talking about Vero anymore.
Yep. Can you, before we wrap up, are there any specific tools you recommend for conducting user research?
Well, Google Docs, Google Survey. Google's been amazing.
The actual survey. Yeah.
The actual survey, within the Googles. I
think it's Google Forms that they call it.
Google Forms, yes. Google Forms have been amazing. I also use MailChimp. I mean, these are standard ones, as a startup, like I'm used to these ones. So I just, MailChimp was good for, it's also free to a certain extent. And then a lot of times, like I would just send like a monthly newsletter. Now they're getting more like weekly. And also in terms of like what types of users are leaving your newsletter. They're no longer interested because we've evolved, right? Like so much has happened. And now we're, so just even learning through those analytics is important. Where are you getting traction from? What type of users are leaving your newsletter? What's the reason for leaving? So that's great. And then also through our app, we do analytics, through the app, which sure. I'm now like so obsessed about the metrics there. And then also the website, right? So Google Analytics, are we getting more user base? Like, where are they coming from? So the source of the, that, and are there any websites that are referring us? So just even learning, like constantly learning. It's a lot of data that we
sure.
have now. So just standard platforms.
Okay. One more I can add to that mix, which is something that a company on the Startup Hype Man roster did that was very effective was a site called userinterviews.com, which is basically you just offer a $20 Starbucks gift card and you say, this is exactly the type of person I'm looking to talk to. They blast that message out to their database, and those people who respond, you can even accept or deny them once they say, I'm this person, based on another questionnaire you put out. And then you get 25 minutes, 30 minutes on the phone with them. And it is great to learn. And if you're ready to sell your product, we've even been able to basically naturally walk it towards the thing to sell where they're asking how they buy it instead of you sell it. So it can be very effective when used tactfully.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's also pre-apps. But the one thing that I would do differently, we launched our beta, and the pre-apps is basically only for pre-launch companies. So if we hadn't launched our beta, you can actually get on that platform, and there's like so many users that will tell you how they feel about your product even before it's launched. And that's how they kind of create hype, right? Because it's like, oh, this product hasn't launched yet. So so that's the one thing that I would do differently. There's also product hunt. I'm exploring, like, maybe we'll do a bit of a soft launch online product hunt on International Women's Day coming up. Cool. So we'll see how that goes. But there's so many different avenues of even just seeing, like, are you getting any upvotes on product hunt?
Sure.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, can you let our listeners know where they can find you, where they can find Locale, and perhaps get in touch?
Yeah, so Locale, you go to the website, locelle.com. We are in both app stores. Primarily our user base is in Victoria, Vancouver, a little bit in Seattle, and some in the Bay Area, but mostly in, of course, Canada. If you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, as well as Twitter. It's at Humaira with 3 A's, so it's HUMAIRAAA. And Instagram Locale app, Facebook Locale app, LinkedIn Locale app. It's all just pretty Locale app. Yeah.
Awesome. To wrap up, we will end how we end every episode, which is our final answer / takeaway to the topic question for today. I will kick it off and then I'll throw it to you. Our topic today was, how do you conduct worthwhile user research? Well, amongst everything that we discussed, I think my biggest learning or my biggest piece of advice here is understand there is a difference between problem market fit and product market fit, and start with problem market fit. Humaira, how do you conduct worthwhile user research? Top line takeaway or piece of advice?
Oh, wow. More. You want more. I would just say, leave your house, leave your workplace as soon as possible. Go talk to real people. Do all the, this would be a primary user research, methods to talking to real people, even people that you think may not want your product. Because you'll learn so much. And that's the biggest thing I have learned, even as we continuously evolve and progress. I'm learning so much every day. We had a churn, and I was like, why are you leaving? Just tell me more. Like, what did you think the product did, and what did it actually do? So constantly talk to real users. That's the benefit of being a startup, because you have this is the gold mine, right? Like, we have real people and we have access to these real people. So make the most of it. Take advantage. Ask these people and make sure you're not going by what exactly they're telling you, but how they're behaving, how they're actually using the platform. Because again, people will tell you what you want to hear. You will find online what you want to see.
Sure.
So that would be my biggest kind of comment on this topic.
From Karachi to Canada, Humaira Ahmed, thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That brings us to a close. Did you like what you heard? Did it tingle your earbuds? Support your startup ecosystem and share this episode with another founder to help them. If you don't have anyone in mind, then leave a rating and review of the show on iTunes so more entrepreneurs can learn about it. And if you want more, head to startuphypeman.com and click on the knowledge section to get a bonus blog post written by this week's guest where they unpack the topic even more. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Startup Hype Man is more than a podcast. In fact, we support startups across the United States and globally develop sales and marketing acumen with messaging that stands out to customers and stands apart from competitors. Learn more and fill out a form at startuphypeman.com if you want to chat. Shout out to this week's guests for spending their time with us, and shout out to music artist Sir the Baptist for providing our show's theme song. Catch you next time. Hype Man out. Word up, raise up.
Got you howling at the moon, yeah. This a dance with the devil, girl. Instead of sundown too, yeah. This a dance with the devil, girl. Tell me what you gonna do, yeah. This a dance with the devil, girl. And if you can't get it loose, then fall into the truth. It got you howling at the moon, yeah. This a dance with the devil, girl. Instead of sundown, yeah. This a dance with the devil, girl. Tell me what you gonna do, yeah. This a dance with the devil, girl. And if you can't get it loose, then
it's a dance with the devil.